Hello everybody, welcome back to Norse Pagan Corner. Again, I'm going to try to find a better title for my page, but this is all I got right now. Sorry it's been a while. I have to continue reading from chapter 2, Odin's story. I still haven't finished it yet, but I'm back. Again, originally what I was going to do is if there was any questions that anyone had, I was going to go ahead and answer them right now before getting into the next chapter. But seeing as how no one left any comments, no one has any questions, I can't exactly do that. And also I didn't finish reading that chapter, so I'm going to finish that now. And then depending on how much time it takes to finish that chapter, I might read the other chapter, and then we'll see. Anyway, continuing on. Not sure where I left off exactly on this page. I'm pretty sure I left off at May Day festivals. But upon Odin's return, the usurpers vanished forever, and in commemoration of the disappearance of the false Odin, who had ruled 7 months and had brought nothing but unhappiness to the world, and of the return of the benevolent deity, the heathen Northmen formally celebrated yearly festivals, which were long continued as May Day rejoicings. Until very lately there was always on that day a grand procession in Sweden, known as the May Ride, in which a flower-decked May King, Odin, pelted with blossoms the fur-enveloped Winter, his supplanter, until he put him to ignominious flight. In England also the 1st of May was celebrated as a festive occasion in which Maypole dances, May Queens, Maid Marian, and Jack in the Green played prominent parts. As personifications of heaven, Odin of course was the lover and spouse of the earth. And as to them, the earth bore a threefold aspect. The Northmen depicted him as a polygamist and allotted to him several wives. The first among these was Jord, Erda, the primitive earth, daughter of Night, or of the giantess Fjord. She bore him his famous son Thor, the god of thunder. The second and principal wife was Frigga, a personification of the civilized world. She gave him Balder, the gentle god of spring. Hermod, and according to some authorities, Tyr. The third wife was Rinda, a personification of the hard and frozen earth, who reluctantly yields to his warm embrace, but finally gives birth to Vali, the emblem of vegetation. Odin is also said to have married Sage or Laga, the goddess of history, hence our verb to say, and to have daily visited her in the crystal hall of Sokvabek, beneath a cool, ever-flowing river, to drink its waters and listen to her songs about olden times and vanished races. Sokvabek hight the fourth dwelling. Over it flowed the cool Billings. Glad drank there Odin and Saga every day from golden cups. His other wives were Grid, the mother of Vidar, Gunlor, the mother of Bragi, Skadi, and the 9 giantesses who simultaneously, I could talk, I promise, bore Heimdall, all of whom play more or less important parts in the various myths of the North. The historical Odin. Besides this ancient Odin, there was a more modern, semi-historical person age of the same name, to whom all the virtues, powers, and adventures of his predecessors had been attributed. He was the chief of the Aesir, inhabitants of Asia Minor, who sore pressed by the Romans and threatened with destruction of slavery, left their native land about 70 BC and migrated into Europe. This Odin is said to have conquered Russia, Germany, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, leaving a son on the throne of each conquered country. He also built the town of Odense. He was welcomed in Sweden by Gylfi the king, who gave him a share of the realm and allowed him to found the city of Sigtuna, where he built a temple and introduced a new system of worship. Tradition further relates that at his end drew near, this mythical Odin assembled his followers, publicly cut himself 9 times in the breast with a spear, a ceremony called carving gear-odds, and told them he was about to return to his native land, Asgard, his old home, where he would await their coming, to share with him a life of feasting, drinking, and fighting. According to another account, Gylfi, having heard of the power of the Aesir, the inhabitants of Asgard, and wishing to ascertain whether these reports were true, journeyed to the south. In due time, he came to Odin's palace, where he was expected, and where he was deluded by the visions of Ifernhar and Thrydi, three divinities, enthroned one above the other. The gatekeeper, Ganglir, answered all his questions and gave him a long explanation of Northern mythology, which is recorded in the Younger Edda. And then, having finished his instructions, suddenly vanished with the palace amid a deafening noise. According to other very ancient poems, Odin's sons, Weld, Belgd, Sigi, Skjold, Simon, and Yngvi, became kings of East Saxony, West Saxony, Franconia, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and from them are descended the Saxons, Heinz, and Horsa, and the royal families of the northern lands. Still another version relates that Odin and Frigga have 7 sons, who founded the Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. In the course of time, this mysterious king was confounded with Odin, whose worships he introduced, and all his deeds were attributed to the god. Odin was worshipped in numerous temples, but especially in the great fane at Uppsala, where the most solemn festivals were held, and where sacrifices were offered. The victim was generally a horse, but in times of pressing need, human offerings were made, even the king being once offered up to avert a famine. Uppsala's temple, where the North saw Valhall's halls, fair imaged here on earth. Viking Tales of the North, R.B. Anderson. The fire toast at every festival here was drunk in his honor. Well, the first toast at every festival here was drunk in his honor, and besides the 1st of May, one day in every week was held sacred to him, and from his Saxon name, Woden, was called Woden's Day, whence the English word Wednesday has been derived. It was customary for the people to assemble at a shrine on festive occasions to hear the songs of the skalds, who were rewarded for their minstrelsies by the gift of a golden bracelet and armlets, which curled up at the ends and were called Odin's serpents. There are but few remains of ancient northern art now extant, and although rude statues of Odin were once quite common, they have all disappeared, as they were made of wood, a perishable substance which in the hands of the missionaries, and especially of Olaf the Saint, the northern iconoclast was soon reduced to ashes. There in the temple, carved in wood, the image of great Odin stood. Saga of King Olaf Longfellow. Odin himself is supposed to have given his people a code of laws whereby to govern their conduct in a poem called Havamal, or the High Song, which forms parts of the Edda. In this lay, he taught the fallibility of man, the necessities for courage, temperance, independence, and truthfulness, respect for old age, hospitality, charity, and contentment, and gave instructions for the burial of the dead. At home let a man be cheerful, and towards a guest liberal. Of wise conduct he should be, of good memory and ready speech. If much knowledge he desires, he must often talk on what is good. Havamal, Thorpe's translation. And that is the end for Odin's story, or Odin's chapter. I will continue with chapter 3, Frigga. The queen of the gods, Frigga or Frigg, daughter of Fjord and sister of Jord, according to some mythologists, is considered by others as a daughter of Jord and Odin, whom she eventually married. The wedding caused such general rejoicing in Asgard, where the goddesses were greatly beloved. Then ever after it was customary to celebrate its anniversary with feast and song. And the goddess being declared patroness of marriage, her health was always proposed with that of Odin and Thor at wedding feast. Frigga was goddess of the atmosphere, or rather of the clouds, and as such was represented as wearing either snow white or dark garments, according to her somewhat variable moods. She was queen of the gods, and she alone had the privilege of sitting on the throne, Hildskalf, besides her august husband. From thence she too could look over all the world and see what was happening, and according to the belief of our ancestors, she possessed the knowledge of the future, which, however, no one could ever prevail upon her to reveal, thus proving the northern woman could keep a secret inviolable. Of me the gods are sprung, and all that is to come I know, but Locke, in my own breast, and I have none revealed. Balder dead, Matthew Arnold. She was generally represented as a tall, beautiful, and stately woman, crowned with heron plumes, the symbol of silence or forgetfulness, and clothed in pure white robes. secured at the waist by a golden girdle, from which hung a bunch of keys, the distinctive sign of the northern housewife, whose special patroness she was said to be. Although she often appeared beside her husband, Frigga preferred to remain in her own palace called Fensalir, the Hall of Mist or of the Sea, where she diligently plied her wheel or distaff, spinning golden threads or weaving long webs of bright-colored clouds. In order to perform this work, she made use of a marvelous jeweled spinning wheel or distaff, which at night shone brightly in the sky as a constellation, known in the north as Frigga's spinning wheel, while the inhabitants of the south called the same stars Orion's girdle. To her hall, Fensalir, the gracious goddess, invited husbands and wives who had led virtuous lives on earth, so that they might enjoy each other's companionship even after death, and never be called upon to part again. There in the glen, Fensalir stands, the house of Frey, honored mother of the gods, and shows its lightened windows and the open doors. Balder dead, Matthew Arnold. Frigga was therefore considered the goddess of conjugal and motherly love, and was specifically worshipped by married lovers and tender parents. This exalted office did not entirely absorb her thoughts, however, for we are told that she was very fond of dress, and whenever she appeared before the assembled gods, her attire was rich and becoming, and her jewels chosen with much taste. The stolen gold. Frigga's love of adornment once led her sadly astray, for in her longing to possess some new ornament, she secretly purloined a piece of gold from a statue representing her husband, which had just been placed in his temple. The stolen metal was entrusted to the dwarves, with instructions to fashion a marvelous necklace for her use. This, when finished, was so resplendent that it greatly enhanced her charms, and even increased Odin's love for her. But when he discovered the theft of the gold, he angrily summoned the dwarves and bade them reveal who had dared to touch his statue. Unwilling to betray the queen of the gods, the dwarves remained obstinately silent, and seeing that no information could be elicited from them, Odin commanded that the statue should be placed above the temple gate and set to work to devise runes which should endow it with the power of speech and enable it to denounce the thief. When Frigga heard these tidings, she trembled with fear and implored her favorite attendant, Fula, to invent some means of protecting her from All Father's wrath. Fula, who was always ready to serve her mistress, immediately departed, and soon returned, accompanied by a hideous dwarf, who promised to prevent the statue from speaking if Frigga would only deign to smile graciously upon him. This boon having been granted, the dwarf hastened off to the temple, caused a deep sleep to fall upon the guards, and while they were thus unconscious, pulled the statue down from its pedestal and broke it into pieces, so that it could never betray Frigga's theft, in spite of all Odin's effort to give it the power of speech. Odin, discovering this sacrilege on the morrow, was very angry indeed, so angry that he left Asgard and utterly disappeared, carrying away with him all the blessings which he had been wont to shower upon gods and men. According to some authorities, his brothers, as we have already seen, took advantage of his absence to assume his form and secure possession of his throne and wife. But although they looked exactly like him, they could not restore the lost blessings, and allowed the ice giant or Jotuns to invade the earth and bind it fast in their cold fetters. These wicked giants pinched the leaves and buds till they all shriveled up, stripped the trees bare, shrouded the earth in a great white coverlet, and veiled it in impenetrable mist. But at the end of 7 weary months, the true Odin relented and returned, and when he saw all the evil that had been done, he drove the usurpers away, forced the frost giants to relax their grip of the earth, and to release her from her icy bonds, and again showered all his blessings down upon her, cheering her with the light of his smile. Odin outwitted. As has already been seen, Odin, although god of wit and wisdom, was sometimes no match for his wife Frigga, who, womanlike, was sure to obtain her way by some means. On one occasion, the august pair was seated upon Hilskelfi, gazing with interest upon the Wendlers and Vandals, who were preparing for a battle which was to decide which people should henceforth have supremacy. Odin gazed with satisfaction upon the Vandals, who were loudly praying to him for victory. But Frigga watched the movements of the Wendlers with more attention, because they had entreated her aid. She therefore turned to Odin and coaxingly inquired whom he meant to favor on the morrow. He, wishing to evade her question, declared he would not decide as it was time for bed, but would give the victory to those upon whom his eyes first rested in the morning. This answer was shrewdly calculated, for Odin knew that his couch was so turned that upon waking he would face the Vandals, and he intended looking out from thence instead of waiting until he had mounted his throne. But although so cunningly contrived, his plan was frustrated by Frigga, who, divining his purpose, waited until he was sound asleep, and then noiselessly turned his couch so that he should face her favorites. Then she sent word to the windlers to dress their women in armor and send them out in battle array at dawn, with their long hair carefully combed down over their cheeks and breast. Take them, thy womenfolk, maiden and wives, over your ankles, lace on the white war horse over your bosoms, link up the hard male nest over your lips, plait long tresses with cunning, so war beast full bearded, King Odin shall deem you, when off the gray sea beach at sunrise you greet him. The Longbeard Saga, Charles Kingsley. These instructions were carried out with scrupulous exactness, and when Odin awoke the next morning, his first conscious glance fell upon their armed hosts, and he exclaimed in surprise, "What Longbeards are those?" In German, the ancient word for Longbeards was Langobarden, which was the name used to designate the Lombards. Frigga, upon hearing his exclamation, which she had foreseen, immediately cried out in triumph that although Allfather had given them a new name, and was in honor bound to follow the usual northern custom and give them a baptismal gift, a name thou hast given them, shames neither thee nor them. Well can they wear it, give them the victory, first have they greeted thee, give them the victory, yoke fellow mine. The Longbeard Saga, Charles Kingsley. Odin, seeing he had been so cleverly outwitted, made no demur, and in memory of the victory which his favor vouchsafed to them, the windlers retained the name given by the King of the Gods, who ever after watched over them with special care, giving them many blessings, among others a home in the sunny south on the fruitful plains of Lombardy. Fulla. Frigga had as her own special attendants a number of beautiful maidens, among whom were Vala, her sister, according to some authorities, to whom she entrusted her jewel casket. Fulla also presided over her mistress's toilet, was privileged to put on her golden shoes, attended her everywhere, was her confidant, and often advised her how best to help the mortals who implored her aid. Fulla was very beautiful indeed, and had long golden hair, which she wore flowing loose over her shoulders, restrained only by a golden circlet or a snood. As her hair was emblematic of the golden grain, the circlet represented the binding of the sheaf. Fulla was also known as Abundia or Abundanta in some parts of Germany, where she was considered the symbol of the fullness of the earth. Hel, Frigga's second attendant, was the goddess of consolation, sent out to kiss away the tears of mourners and pour balm into hearts run by grief. She also listened with ever-open ears to the prayers of mortals, carrying them to her mistress and advising her at times how best to answer them and give the desired relief. Gina. Gina was Frigga's swift messenger, mounted upon her fleet steed, Hofvarpnir, hoof-thrower. She would travel with marvelous rapidity through fire and air, over land and sea, and was therefore considered the personification of the refreshing breeze. Darting thus to and fro, Gina saw that all that was happening upon earth, and told her mistress all she knew. On one occasion, as she was passing over Huna land, she saw King Rir, a lineal descendant of Odin, sitting mournfully by the shore, bewailing his childlessness. The Queen of Heaven, who was also goddess of childbirth, upon hearing this, took an apple, the emblem of fruitfulness, from her private store, gave it to Gina, and bade her carry it to the king. With the rapidity of the element she personified, Gina darted away, and as she passed over Rir's head, she dropped her apple into his lap with a radiant smile. What flies up there so quickly driving past? Her answer from the clouds, as rushing by, I fly not, nor do drive, but hurry fast. Hoof flainer swift through cloud and mist and sky. Asgard and the gods, Wagner McDowell. The king pondered for a moment upon the meaning of this sudden apparition and gift, and then hurried home, his heart beating high with hope, and gave the apple to his wife to eat. In due season, to his intense joy, she bore him a son. Volsung, the great northern hero who became so famous that he gave his name to all his race. Loft, Vision, and Sin. Besides the three mentioned above, Frigga had other attendants in her train. They were the mild and gracious maiden Lofin, Praise or Love, whose duty it was to remove all obstacles from the path of lovers. My lily tall from her saddle bearing, I led them forth through the temple faring. To thy altar circle where priest Amon, Lochner's vow she took with unfaltering tongue. Viking Tales of the North, R.B. Anderson. Vion's duty was to incline obdurate hearts to love, to maintain peace and concord among mankind, and to reconcile quarreling husbands and wives. Sin, Truth, guarded the door of Frigga's palace, refusing to open it to those who were not allowed to come in. When she had once shut the door upon a would-be intruder, no appeal would avail to change her decision. She therefore presided over all tribunals and trials, and whenever a thing was to be vetoed, the usual formula was to declare that sin was against it. Gifhon was also one of the maidens in Frigga's palace, and to her were entrusted all those who died unwedded, whom she received and made happy forever. According to some authorities, Gjalfam did not remain a virgin herself, but married one of the giants, by whom she had 4 sons. The same tradition goes on to declare that Odin sent her before him to visit Gylfi, king of Sweden, and to and to beg for some land which she might call her own. The king, amused at her request, promised her as much land as she could plow around in one day and night. Gylfam, nothing daunted, changed her 4 sons into oxen, harnessed them to a plow, and began to cut a furrow so wide and deep that the king and his couriers were amazed. But Gifon continued her work without showing any signs of fatigue, and when she had plowed all around a large piece of land, forcibly wrenched it away, and made her oxen drag it down to the sea, where she made it fast and called it Sealand. Gifon drew from Gylfi rich and stored up treasure. The land she joined to Denmark, 4 heads and 8 eyes bearing. While hot sweat trickled down to them, the oxen dragged the reft mast, and that formed this winsome island. Norse Mythology, R.B. Anderson. As for the hollow she left behind, it was quickly filled with water and formed a lake, at first called Logarum, the sea, but now known as Malar, whose every indentation corresponds with the headlands of Sealand. Gylfan, the married Skoid, one of Odin's sons, and became the ancestress of the royal Danish race of Skjoldungs, dwelling in the city of Hildra or Lethra, which she founded and which became the principal place of sacrifice for the heathen Danes. Era, Vara, Vor, and Snortra. Era, also Frigga's attendant, was considered a most skillful physician. She gathered simples all over the earth to cure both wounds and disease, and it was her province to teach the science to women, who were the only ones to practice medicine among the ancient nations of the north. Gaping wounds are bound by Era. Valhalla, J.C. Jones. Vara heard all oaths and punished perjurers, while she rewarded those who faithfully kept their word. Then there was also Vor, Faith, who knew all that was to occur throughout the world, and Snorda, goddess of virtue, who had mastered all knowledge. With such a galaxy of attendants, and it's little wonder that Frigga was considered a powerful deity. But in spite of the prominent place she occupied in northern religion, she had no special temple nor shrine, but was but little worshipped except in company with Odin. Holda. While Frigga was not known by this name, in southern Germany there were other goddesses worshipped there, whose attributes were so exactly like hers that they were evidently the same, although they bore very different names in the various provinces. Among them was the fair goddess Hulda or Fra Hala, who graciously dispensed many rich gifts. Sorry, I saw my son's cat in his room. My house is haunted. Anyway, whose attributes were so exactly like hers that they were evidently the same, although they bore very different names in the various provinces. Among them was the fair goddess Hulda or Fra Hala, who graciously dispensed many rich gifts as she presided over the weather. The people were wont to declare when the snowflakes fell that Fru Halla was shaking her bed, and when it rained that she was washing her clothes, often pointing to the white clouds as her linen which she had put to bleach. With long gray strips of clouds drifted across the sky, she said she was weaving, for she was supposed to be also a very diligent weaver, spinner, and housekeeper. It is said she gave flax to mankind and taught them how to use it, and in the title of the following story is told about the way in which she bestowed this invaluable gift. The discovery of flax. There was once a peasant who daily left his wife and children in the valley to take his sheep up the mountain to pasture. And as he watched his flock grazing on the mountainside, he often had opportunity to use his crossbow and bring down a chamois, whose flesh would furnish his larder with food for many a day. While pursuing a fine animal, one day he saw it disappear behind a boulder, and when he came to the spot, he was amazed to see a doorway in the neighboring glacier. For in the excitement of the pursuit, he had climbed higher and higher, until he was now on top of the mountain, where glittered the everlasting snow. The shepherd boldly passed through the open door, and soon found himself in a wonderful jeweled cave, hung with stalactites, in the center of which stood a beautiful woman, clad in silvery robes and attended by a host of lovely maidens crowned with alpine roses. In his surprise, the shepherd sank to his knees, and as in a dream, heard the queenly central figure bid him choose anything he saw to carry away with him. Although dazzled by the glow of the precious stones around him, the shepherd's eyes constantly reverted to a little nosegay of blue flowers, which the gracious apparition held in her hand, and he now timidly proffered a request that it might become his. Smiling with pleasure, Hulda, for it was she, gave it to him, telling him he had chosen wisely and would live as long as the flowers did not droop and fade. Then giving the shepherd a measure of seed, which she had told him to sow in his field, the goddess bade him be gone, and as the thunder pealed and the earth shook, the poor man found himself out upon the mountainside once more, and slowly wended his way home to his wife, to whom he told his adventure and showed the lovely blue flowers and the measure of seed. The woman reproached her husband bitterly for not having brought some of the precious stones which he so glowingly described, instead of the blossoms and seeds. Nevertheless, the man proceeded to sow the latter, and he found to his surprise that the measure supplied seed enough for several acres. Soon the little green shoots began to appear, and one moonlight night, while the peasant was gazing upon them, as was his wont, for he felt a curious attraction to the field which he had sown, and often lingered there, wondering what kind of grain would be produced, he saw a misty form hover above the field with hands outstretched as if in blessing. At last the field blossomed, and countless little blue flowers opened their calyxes to the golden sun. When the flowers had withered and the seed was ripe, Hulda came once more to teach the peasant and his wife how to harvest the flax. For such it was, and from it to spin, weave, and bleach linen. As the people of the neighborhood willingly purchased both linen and flaxseed, the peasant and his wife soon grew very rich indeed. And while he plowed, sowed, and harvested, she spun, wove, and bleached the linen. The man lived to a good old age and saw his grandchildren and great-grandchildren grow up around him. All this time his carefully treasured bouquet had remained fresh as when he first brought it home. But one day he saw that during the night the flowers had drooped and were dying. Knowing what this portended, and that he too must die, the peasant climbed the mountain once more to the glacier, and found again the doorway for which he had often vainly searched. He entered the icy portal and was never seen or heard of again, for according to the legend, the goddess took him under her care and bade him live in her cave, where his every wish was gratified. Tannhauser. According to medieval tradition, Hulda dwelt in a cave in the Horselberg in Thuringia, where she was known as Fru Venus and was considered as an enchantress who lured mortals into her realm, where she detained them forever, steeping their senses in all manner of sensual pleasures. The most famous of her victims was Tannhauser, who after he had lived under her spell for a season, experienced a revulsion of feeling which loosened her bonds over his spirit and induced anxious thoughts concerning his soul. He escaped from her power and hastened to Rome to confess his sins and seek absolution. But when the Pope heard of his association with one of the pagan goddesses whom the priests taught were nothing but demons, he declared that the knight could no more hope for pardon than to see his staff bear buds and bloom. Hast thou within the nets of Satan lain? Hast thou thy soul to her perdition pledged? Hast thou thy lip to hell's enchantress lent, to drain damnation from her reeking cup? Then know that sooner from the withered staff that in my hand I hold green leaves shall spring, than from the brand in hellfire scorched rebloom the blossoms of salvation. Tannhauser, Owen Meredith. Crushed with grief at this pronouncement, Tannhauser fled, and despite the entreaties of his faithful friend Eckhart, no great time elapsed ere he returned to the Horselberg, where he vanished within the cave. He had no sooner disappeared, however, than the Pope's messengers arrived, proclaiming that he was pardoned, for the withered staff had miraculously bloomed, thus proving to all that there was no sin too heinous to be pardoned, providing repentance was sincere. Dashed to the hip with travel, dewed with haste, a flying post, and in his hand he bore a withered staff o'er flourished with green leaves, who followed by a crowd of youth and eld. That saying to stun with sound in the larken heavens, a miracle from Rome. Glory to God that makes the bare bough green. Spraying in the midst, then hot for answer, axe news of the night, Tannhauser, Owen Meredith. Hulda was also the owner of a magic fountain called Quickborn, which rivaled the famed Fountain of Youth, and of a chariot in which she rode from place to place when she inspected her domain. This vehicle having once suffered damage, the goddess bade a wheelwright repair it, and when he had finished, told him to keep some chips as his pay. The man was indignant at such a meager reward, and kept only a very few of the number, but to his surprise he found these on the morrow changed to gold. Fricka, thy wife, this way she reins her harness of rams. Hey, how she whirls, the golden whip, the luckless breast, unboundedly bleat, her wheels wildly she rattles, wrath is lit in her look. Wagner, Foreman's translation. Eostre, the goddess of spring. The Saxon goddess Eostre, or Ostara, goddess of spring, whose name has survived in the English word Easter, is also identical with Frigga, for she too is considered goddess of the earth, or rather of nature's resurrection after the long death of winter. This gracious goddess was so dearly loved by the old Teutons that even after Christianity had been introduced, they retained so pleasant a recollection of her that they refused to have her degraded to the rank of a demon, like many of their other divinities, and transferred her name to their great Christian feast. It had long been customary to celebrate the day by the exchange of presents or of colored eggs, for the egg is the type of beginning of life, so the early Christians continued to observe this rule, declaring, however, that the egg is also symbolic of the resurrection. In various parts of Germany, stone altars can still be seen, which are known as Easter stones, because they were dedicated to the fair goddess Ostara. They were crowned with flowers by the young people, who danced gaily around them by the light of great bonfires, a species of popular games practiced until the middle of the present century, in spite of the priests' denunciations and of the repeatedly published edicts against them. Bertha, the White Lady. In other parts of Germany, Frigga, Hulda, or Ostara is known by the name of Bricha, Bertha, or the White Lady. She is best known under this title in Thuringia, where she was supposed to dwell in a hollow mountain, keeping watch over the Hemchine souls of the unborn children and of those who died unbaptized. Here Bertha watched over agriculture, caring for the plants which her infant troop watered carefully. For each babe was supposed to carry a little jar for that express purpose. While the goddess was duly respected and her retreat unmolested, she remained where she was, but tradition relates that she once left the country with her infant train, dragging her plow, and settled elsewhere to continue her kind ministrations. Bertha is the legendary ancestress of several noble families, and she is supposed to be the same as the industrious queen of the same name, the mythical mother of Charlemagne, whose era has become proverbial, for in speaking of the Golden Age in France and Germany, it is customary to say, in the days when Bertha spun. As this Bertha is supposed to have developed in a very large and flat foot, From continuously pressing the treadle of her wheel, she is often represented in medieval art as a woman with a splay foot, and hence known as Lorraine Pedoc. I can't say it. An ancestress of the imperial house of Germany, the White Lady is supposed to appear in the palace before a death or misfortune in the family. And the superstition is still so rife in Germany that the newspapers in 1884 contained the official report of a sentinel who declared that he had seen her flit past him in one of the palace corridors. As Bertha was renowned for her spinning, she naturally was regarded as the special patroness of that branch of family industry, and was said to flit through the streets of every village at nightfall during the 12 nights between Christmas and January 6th, peering into every window to inspect the spinning of the household. The maidens whose work had been carefully performed were rewarded by a present of one of her own golden threads or a distaff full of extra fine flax. But whenever a careless spinner was found, her wheel was broken, her flax soiled, and if she had failed to honor the goddess by eating plenty of the cakes baked at that period of the year, she was cruelly punished. In Mecklenburg, this same goddess is known as Frau God or Wode, the female form of Wotan or Odin, and her appearance is always considered the harbinger of great prosperity. She is also supposed to be a great huntress and to lead the wild hunt, mounted upon a white horse, her attendants being changed into hounds and all manner of wild beasts. In Holland, she was called Vrouw Eld, and from her the Milky Way is known by the Dutch as Vrouw Eldenstraat, while in parts of northern Germany she was called Nerthus, Mother Earth. Her sacred car was kept on the island, presumably Rügen, where the priests guarded it carefully until she appeared to take a yearly journey throughout her realm to bless the land. The goddess, her face completely hidden by a thick veil, then sat in this car, which was drawn by 2 cows, and she was respectfully escorted by the priest. When she passed, the people did homage by ceasing all warfare and laying aside their weapons. They donned festive attire and began no quarrel until the goddess had again retired to her sanctuary. Then both car and goddess were bathed in secret lake, the Zwarte Sea, in Rügen, which swallowed up the slaves who had assisted at the bathing, and once more the priests resumed their watch over the sanctuary and grove of Nerthus or Halden to await her next appearance. In Scandinavia, this goddess was also known as Huldra and boasted of the train of attendant wood nymphs, who sometimes sought the society of mortals to enjoy a dance upon the village green. They could always be detected, however, by the tip of a cow's tail, which trailed from beneath their long snow-white garments. These Huldra folk were the special protectors of the cattle on the mountainside, and were said to surprise the lonely travelers at times by the marvelous beauty of the melodies they sang to beguile the hours at their task. The end. That was chapter 3. Thank you guys for listening if you stayed this long. Once again, if you have any questions, if you want to know anything, or you have any comments, please go ahead, leave them below. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to my channel. And thank you again for listening if you did. I'll see you again next time in Norse Pagan Corner. Bye guys.